I'm going to show that to you guys. And put it on something solid like a bookcase or a bookshelf back there. All right, so I am excited to introduce our author tonight, Jasmine Guillory, and she will be in conversation with Petra Meyer, NPR. She's an editor of All Things Considered. She focuses on genre fiction over there and appears on the occasional episode of Pop Culture Happy Hour. And our author tonight needs no introduction. She is a graduate of Wellesley College and Stanford Law School. Earlier this year, Jasmine Guillory took the romance world a storm with her debut novel, The Wedding Date, which I'm sure many of you have read. And she is here tonight to celebrate her new release and, as of yesterday, New York Times bestseller, The Proposal. So
Do I need a mic? All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm so excited to see all you romance nerds. And also, can I just say that how weird it is that Life Imitates Art, we have like a topic, as we say in the business, a news hook with that jerk who wrecked the New York Marathon with the public proposal. What?
16 miles in, like,
He could wait to the finish line.
he had 10 more miles to go.
I mean, I really hope that they like arranged it between themselves beforehand. Otherwise, dude.
I feel like I have never run a marathon or I've contemplated it, but like people are always talking about their marathon times. I feel like that would kind of cut down your time. Number one, if you have to stop in the middle, and then the whole rest of the time you're like, what just happened? Did that just happen? Like,
Also, like, way to make it all about him. You're running a marathon, but
at least, I mean, I would have liked it if you'd waited until the end, but at least wait until the end. Right?
yes, absolutely. I just had to get that out of the way because, like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening the week we're going to talk about this book, which kicks off.
Also, by the way, now I find out about every public proposal immediately. Everyone tells me. I get texts about every single one.
Totally. I'm sorry, I should maybe
Yeah.
have brought it up.
No, it's okay. I love talking about it.
So, but before we get into the actual questions, do you have a piece picked out you would like to read for our audience?
Yeah, I'll just read a little bit. So this is from a few chapters in the proposals at the beginning, and then Nick, the heroine of the book, and had dinner with Carlos, and they had a little like will they won't they kiss, and then they did not. Nick shut the door behind Carlos and closed her eyes. Maybe, she thought, if she stood here for a few minutes with her forehead against the door, it would magically take away the far too many feelings going through her head right now. She gave it about 2 minutes, but it didn't work. So she flopped back down on the couch and pulled the blanket over her face. Why hadn't he offered to stay with her that night? Fisher or no Fisher? She would have said, no, you're too busy. I don't want to inconvenience you more than I have. And he would have offered again, and she would have said, are you sure? And he would have said, of course. And she would have said, you really don't have to, but... And he would have said, I want to. And then she would have tackled him on the couch. That would have been a much better ending tonight than her being alone on her couch feeling like an idiot. Worse, he hadn't even tried to kiss her. She'd given him every damn opportunity. She told you the second time is terrible, but people did tell me that. I just didn't understand what that meant until like last Tuesday, I was texting other writer friends like, is it normal to be in bed in the fetal position on one day? And they were like, yeah, that's totally normal, that makes sense. The second time it wasn't quite that there was more pressure, it just felt so different. Like the first time I was like, if one person out there buys my book who's not related to me, this is amazing. And so the second time it's just like, feels like, am I gonna be able to keep doing this? Like I really hope so. So it's a very different experience.
We all hope you can keep doing it. So I want to take off from the scene you just read. Occurs after Nick and Carlos have dinner, but I was actually more interested in the dinner because one of the things I love in your books is the way you use food. I was killing time before this interview, and so I went across the street to Milk, Christina Tosi stand, and I bought Katie truffles, and I was like, Alexa and Nick would approve that I have done this.
Yes, indeed.
I love how it's just there and it's not a big deal and they enjoy it.
Yeah, you know what was funny? One of the first comments I got about the wedding date was like, these people eat so much food. And I was thinking, don't just people eat a lot of food normally? This feels like a normal way to interact with food in your life. But I actually find that like most of the time when I'm hanging out with friends and family, it's around like a table. And so that felt normal to me to have people interacting over food, and then I like to talk about food, so I always want to talk about what they're eating.
I like to read about people eating pepperoni pizza too. The other kind of through line, I know these are like not thematically linked, but the other through line I noticed, when you think about romance tropes and everybody has their favorite things, both of your books start with people who have to kind of fake a relationship, like, Alexa's literally a fake girlfriend. Nick and Carlos are, we're going to keep this casual. And then they have to negotiate the transition. Is that a trope that appeals to you, and why?
I mean, like, the fake relationship trope is absolutely one of my favorites. I also love, although this happens a lot more in historical books than contemporaries, but the arranged marriage and then they accidentally fall in love. Oh my god, I love it. It's a lot harder to do that, like, contemporary, it's like immigration something, but that's difficult these days. So the fake relationship, I had a lot of fun with writing.
What is it that appeals to you about that?
I think there's so much pretense in relationships anyway that I think it's fun to explore, like, people kind of conspiring on the pretense, and then in some ways then it's like easier to be honest with one another. And I think also, like, the thing I had a lot of fun with in the wedding date about it was like, it felt like none of this is real anyway. I can just be who I normally am with this guy instead of just trying to like act like the perfect girlfriend or something, which I feel like a lot of us fall into those traps at the beginning of a relationship. She was like, I'm never going to see this guy again. I might as well just be who I really am. And so I think that's a really fun way to kind of explore who people are in relationships.
Another thing I love is the way you capture that new relationship energy. Oh God, I like this person. Why did he not notice my boobs? Is he touching me? I think he's touching me. Was that something that you were consciously aiming to capture?
I think that like that new relationship, like, there's a lot that I love in a romance novel. I think people like having fun with one another really intrigues me. Whether it's just like, we're at this ball and we're going to pretend this, or if it's like a sports thing, like that's what I find sports romances really fun for that reason too, because it's like we're cheering this dance together and then we jump up and hug and then,
I could ask if you read Intercepted, but
yes, I loved it. I loved that one. Yeah.
I'll have to read it.
Yeah.
And I like football actually. I was going to say I'm not the biggest sports fan. Football's different. Anyway, sorry, interruption. I guess one thing that I also want to ask, and probably 8 million people have asked you about this, but these are interracial stories, these are interracial romances, and apart from kind of a moment where, I remember the moment where like Nick meets Alexa, she's like, he didn't tell me you were black, it's just a fact of life. Was that something, how did you approach writing?
Yeah, I wanted those relationships to feel real in the way that like all of the interracial relationships, whether like just friendships or actual relationships in my life have felt, right? Because there's always a point in which when you are having a relationship with someone who's not of your culture, where you have a little like, oh, we don't speak the same language on this, let's talk about that moment, and then you're like, all right, now let's go get tacos. Like, it's usually not, people talk about like a national conversation on race, like those are tiny conversations that happen on a daily basis when you actually have friends who aren't of your same race. And so that's how I wanted that to feel. I did, like, one of the things that I wanted to get across in the, like, when Alexa and Nick meet in this book is sort of like, there's a moment that I've had a number of times where, I'm going to a friend's party, like a white friend, I don't know who's gonna be there. I get there and like see another black woman across the room that I don't know, and I'm like, this is gonna be fine. And I think that's how I wanted them to both like relax when they saw each other in that same way. But again, those are like small moments, not the whole of either of the relationships.
I love the idea of those two being friends too, and I like the way that you feature friendships in both of these books. I feel like, especially in the proposal, there are as many scenes of Nick and her friends as there are of her and Carlos, and I kind of love that because, you know, like the sassy best friend trope is totally done to that, especially if you read as much Brit chick fiction as I do. So I really enjoy that they were three-dimensional. Was that an important thing to you to really?
Yeah, I mean, you know, my friendships have been like some of the most important things in my life. And I have had those group texts where they're like, Jasmine, what are you doing? Like, come on, stop it. Or where I'm doing that to someone else. And so, you know, those are like, those friendships like that are the people who can like yell at you when you're being ridiculous, but also pump you up when you need it. And though, like, I wanted both Alexa and Nick to have people like that in their lives.
It's also, it kind of makes them more three-dimensional. I mean, usually when you're reading a romance novel, even the good ones, it's, you know, you're invested in the lead couple, and, you know, their friends are kind of there as a contrast.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want their friends to be like comic relief, though I think sometimes they are, but I wanted them to like make each of them feel more real. I mean, that, you know, that was how I got Carlos, was like I wanted Drew to have a friend like that, and then Carlos came.
And his car.
Yeah.
All the stuff about the car. Yeah, I can see you making your face, I was just sharing a moment with this nice lady about like how like Carlos's car, you think he's such a jerk in the first book because he's got a red whatever it is, and then there's this. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys. I'm a sucker for cars. Like, that's why I watch Supernatural. It's for the car. Anyways. So one of the things that I think about a lot when I read romances, especially recent romances, is how romance has really taken the forefront in modeling appropriate behavior in relationships. And I feel like I'm seeing that with consent in your books.
You know, so one of the best compliments that I've gotten on my books is I did a Skype book club for a friend of mine from law school. Her book club read the book, and it was like a bunch of suburban moms. And one of the people in her book club told me that these are the kind of books that she wants her daughters to start reading and like learning about how men should treat them. And I was like, woo. Because I just like, I want the men in my books to treat women the way that we all should be treated, and the women to like recognize when they're being treated badly and what they want out of a relationship. And you know, again, like they've all had bad relationships before, so it's not like this is a perfect world. But those are the things that I strive for.
And I even like, I mean, it's not just consent. There's a moment, you know, well, the whole beginning of the proposal is Carlos and Angela rescuing Nick because he learned something about bystander intervention from his cousin. And I was like, oh, yes, people need to learn this.
Yeah.
And it was woven fairly, and he gives credit to a woman, you know, for this good idea that he got. You still might be hard. So, speaking of the friend, I got off track. Do you ever write like interstitials? Because I really want a short story about Natalie and Dana.
Oh, I haven't thought about that, but we'll think about that maybe later.
Please.
I have a tiny idea for one that might happen, but we'll see. I'll bring that up to my editor and see what she thinks.
And I have to ask also now, like, do you ever think, you know, since we've been talking about arranged marriages and people acting out of balls, do you ever think you'd write a historical?
You know, what's funny, so I hadn't read romance for years, and I got back into reading romance like maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was first reading a ton of historicals, and I had been writing before, but it was not in romance, I was writing in adult. And I remember thinking as I was reading them, like, this is so much fun to read, but I don't think I would ever want to write them. And I think just because I don't feel like I would be good at writing historical, mostly because I was a history major, and I know, and I'm a lawyer, so I know, like, I would have a lot of footnotes for everything. I would get, like, too tied up in the research. And so I love reading historical, but it wasn't until, like, I started reading contemporaries that I was like, oh, I think I could do this. But, like, I love reading historicals, but I mean, never say never, certainly. I did not think I would start writing romance novels. If 10 years ago you told me that, I would have thought you were a lunatic. So who knows, but no current plans in the future, let's say that way.
I would just say, like, as a fellow history major and also footnote obsessed, please write it. I love it. It's world building, right? If you're a nerd, you like the world building. So, anyways, but you mentioned you hadn't read romance in about 7 or 8 years, but so you were a romance fan from way back. What's your origin story? Like, what was the first one you picked up? How'd you get into?
Oh, well, so, like, I mean, when I started back reading them recently, I started with Courtney Milan's books, which one of my friends from college had told me that she really loved her books, and I remember, like, reading the first one, the Duchess deal, I think? No, the Countess Conspiracy, maybe. I remember reading the first one, like, sitting in the bathtub on my Kindle, finishing it, and immediately purchasing the next one and learning more about her. And I think I read all of her books in, like, a week. And then I moved on with, like, Tessa Dare. I shot through all of her books. And, like, I moved on to a bunch of other historicals.
Actually, so now I have to ask you, because I ask everybody this question in romance, and I haven't really gotten a good answer yet. What is it with dukes? Jesus, there's 11 dukes in the entire British period.
So I thought about this. Like, dukes are just like the billionaire of, like the 18th, 17th, 19th century, I guess. Like, it's sort of the highest you can get without being a prince, and everyone feels like being a prince is a little too corny, so let's just turn into dukes, which, like, they were all in their, like, 70s and very unattractive. They did not have, like, hardy, attractive sons who all rode horses all the time.
And, like, had bronze muscles because they worked out on the estate with their tenants because they're so good.
Yeah, like, that's not...
I went down a Wikipedia wormhole. You want to talk about being a history major? I was like, there aren't that many dukes. And, like, literally, I said 11, but I think it was actually 13.
Yeah, who aren't the royal ones. Like, there's also
Right.
the royal ones. I've also done that mostly back when I was trying to figure out, like, what title Harry would get when he got married.
This is important.
Yeah.
Totally not a romance question, but do you ever follow that brooch warfare hashtag where that lady...
Yes, although, okay, I thought about this. Because, so one of the things that I did for self-care after that thing that happened 2 years ago today was I read a lot of royal jewelry blogs.
They're fascinating.
Oh yeah, they're amazing because they tell you a lot of history, but they're like
Queen Mary
really,
had the lay, like the Delhi Durbar.
Yes, oh yeah, Queen Mary. She would just like pin them all over herself. And the real royal jewelry bloggers weren't so into that.
Oh really?
Yeah, they were like, this is exaggerating a lot of things, basically.
I kind of wonder that myself.
Yeah.
It's like she's playing to like what we want
Yeah,
to hear.
exactly.
We want to hear that the queen is that shady.
Yeah, the queen is not that shady. Yeah. Like the only slightly shady thing she really did was that she wore the brooch Obama gave her the day before Trump got there. But other than that, like it's just all stuff that she wears sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have to go home. Anyways, I have no idea where it's going. Moving on, British warfare. So, what brought you back to romance?
So I guess it was about 6 years ago, I had a big health crisis, and I discovered that romance is really soothing in times of struggle, because going in, like, nobody's gonna die, everything's gonna be happy at the end, and, like, there might be things in the middle that stress you out, but, like, you can keep reading the book and, like, know it's all gonna be okay, and that's exactly what I needed at the time. So I was reading like 2 a day, which was great.
That's what Kindles are for.
Yes, and I was sick too, so I had nothing else to do but like download 1 million books on my Kindle and then read them all multiple times. And that like really delighted me with romance. So
when I'm trying to explain it to people, I sort of always think about a roller coaster because it's going to take you like all the way up around upside down, but you're going to come back safely at the end. So, do you remember what the first romance novel you ever read was?
Okay, I tried to remember this when I was like a teenager, somewhere a teenager. I went to summer camp and my roommate had brought a bunch of romances. I do not remember the name of it. It was one of the very old school ones where there was like like they were like in the desert and there was like sex in a tent. Like these are the only things that I remember.
Sounds uncomfortable.
Yeah, it did not sound comfortable at all. But I was like, what's this? This sounds interesting. My mother did not read romances, so I did not grow up with those in the house. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I'll find this at the library.
My mother read murder mysteries, so when she started trying to side-eye me about romance novels, I was like, excuse me?
Yeah.
But back to your book. I want to know what's going to happen next. Is it Angela?
Angela might be in the future. The next book, which at this point is scheduled to come out in July, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that yet. I have a feeling I'll be like under the bed that day. Is about Natty, Alexa's best friend from the wedding date, and Theo, Alexa's other friend from the wedding date, who are keeping a little secret from Alexa.
I wish I had a baddie in my life too. Like, I need that one friend who like led to be her fabulous clothes.
We all do, yes.
How are we on time? Where's my 7 minutes? Okay, cool. So I'm like running through my list of like elaborately over-prepared questions. And I'm totally out of them, so I'm gonna wing it.
All right.
What are you reading right now? What's on your romance bookshelf?
So speaking of Intercepted, I have the next one.
Oh, I know, I'm so jealous.
And so I'm really excited to go through that. But also, so this, I don't know if any of the rest of you were big fans of Ballet Shoes and all the shoes.
No, Starfield, yeah.
I love those books obsessively, and I own like many copies of them in paper, but I've been like literally every few months I would search to see if they were out in ebook, because like there are certain books that I want to have with me at all times, and they kept not being out, and they finally came out on Tuesday. So I started reading Ballet Shoes last night, and it made me so happy. And actually, speaking of historicals, I just want to say I need someone. Again, as I said, I don't think I could write this. I need someone to write like a book-length fanfic about Petrova fossil during World War II.
Yes, she's probably
like,
a pilot.
A pilot. Maybe she's like dressing up as a man. I don't know. And like meets someone in the army. They have a wonderful. Like I need this book in my life. You could name her something else. I don't know if there's copyright issues. Whatever. I just need to read that book.
She was totally my favorite also because her name is kind of like mine, and I was obsessed with airplanes.
Yeah.
As a kid.
But yes, so those are the books I'm reading. I'm always reading like multiple books at a time. I'm usually like rereading an old favorite and then reading a new one too.
There's such pleasure in rereading old favorite books. A series that I loved when I was a little kid was the All of a Kind Family books. Yeah, and those were recently, some of them were reissued, and I got them and I was like, oh, it was like visiting with old friends.
Yeah, Betsy Tacy. I also have all of those books in like multiple copies of paper and
those ones I missed out on.
Yeah.
Are they worth picking up now?
Yeah, 100%. They actually have aged very well. Like those are set like maybe 30 years after the Little House books, but I feel like they've aged much better than the Little House books have. I mean, sure, there's a little casual racism, don't get me wrong, but like not a lot of them, not a lot of it, and it is like Betsy wants to be a writer, her parents are very supportive of it in like in 1905, and it is like, they start when she's 5 years old and then go until like the last book is Betsy's wedding, and so it's really fun to like see her and her friends all grow up, and there's a lot of friendship in those books, which I love.
You're reassuring me because like it is the worst to go back to a book that you loved as a kid and go,
Yeah.
I have that problem with the first Dragon Riders of Pern book. I don't know if you remember that. But no, A, it's badly written. B, consent issues.
Yeah.
But you know, dragons will always have a place in my
Yeah.
heart. So, what other? Sorry, my brain just went completely blank. I'm going to throw to the audience because you know what? I'm out of questions, and you guys look like smart people. So I'm going to make you do my job. So who's first?
Hi.
I love your books.
Thank you so
put that
much.
out there. You got me back into romance.
Yay.
I really appreciate it. What inspired you to write in general since you became a lawyer? What took you on the path to become a writer?
So, let's see, it was probably about 8 or so years ago. And I grew up reading a ton. I was always a big reader. I never, had the dream to become a writer. I never thought about that. And then I was working at a job that, after I was there for a year, I realized that I had no real creative outlet in my life. My job was very kind of regimented, and it was fine, but I was like, I need something else that either I'm something new that I'm learning or something, that I'm doing to exercise that part of my brain. And I've always liked to cook, but there are only so many brownies I can give away to people, I tried knitting and I liked it fine, but it didn't really scratch that itch. And so I was like, well, I've always loved to read, maybe I'll like writing. And at that point, it wasn't a career goal of mine. I was just let's see if this is something that I like, that I can have fun with. And I had a few other writer friends and I talked to them about it, and I was very nervous about it because I think it sort of felt like, oh yeah, okay, someone who's a lawyer is bored with their job is like, oh, I'm going to become a writer now. And so I had these very tentative conversations with my friends who later when I told them about it, they were like, oh, that's what we were talking about, okay. And so then I just kind of started. And I read some books about writing, but again, I know myself and that I research too much, so I just kind of dove in and started writing a novel. And I realized that I really liked it. I would come home at night excited to start writing after work, and that's what kept me going, is that I had so much fun doing it.
Hi. So all of your books really feature a lot of details about major Californian cities. So what helped you really integrate that sort of hyper-local sense of cultural identity in your main characters? Thank you.
It felt I wanted the books to have a real sense of place, but it also helped me place things as I was writing them. I need to think about, even when I'm thinking about someone's apartment and what it looks like, I want to know, when they're walking from the living room to the bedroom, what does that look like to them? And so, when I was thinking about, well, what restaurant would they go to on this date? I would think about a specific place. And so then it would help me kind of figure out, if they're driving in this direction, what street are they driving on? So a lot of that was just for me personally, but also I feel there aren't enough fun books about California, and I wanted to write a fun book about California. And especially in LA, I had to move Carlos between books from the west side to the east side, because all my friends who live in LA live on the east side, and I was like, if I'm gonna do scouting or learn where he's gonna go, I need to rely on these people. He can't live on the west side. He's got to get a new job.
I love your books. I also love your Twitter, which is delightful. And so I know that you love Meghan Markle. So I'm very curious, if you were to write her story, how would you change it, or would you leave it as is? Or I just want to hear you talk about Meghan Markle.
Look, one of the things that has brought me the most joy in these very difficult 2 years has been Harry and Meghan. Thank God for them, right? In general, I think that the entire concept of royalty is terrible, but since we have it, now we're a princess, so that's great. It's funny because I'm on a group chat with some friends where we are frequently texting about Harry and Meghan, and I correctly predicted the exact day that they would announce their engagement, which is one of the things that I'm the most proud of. Look, I feel Heather Cox and Jessica Morgan have already written a very good American Marries a Prince book. So, but I had told them, I was like, I bet it's gonna be on the Monday after Thanksgiving, and these are all the reasons why. And then it happened on the Monday after Thanksgiving. But yes, I'm overjoyed. I can't wait for the baby. Yeah. So.
Do you have predictions about the name?
Oh well, I think it depends on if it's boy or girl, which obviously we all want it to be a girl. I feel I don't think Diana can be a first name, although Harry's
On the nose.
a little on the nose. Maybe it'll be in a middle name again, because Charlotte has Diana as her middle name, so maybe. But maybe maybe Megan's mom's name might be in there as a middle name, but I don't think it would be a first name again. But yeah, we'll see. So fun.
Good question. Glad I made you guys do my job.
I love the covers of your books. They're really lovely, and I think there's a really great trend right now to have covers with all these colors. And I'm thinking of like the Kiss Quotient,
Yeah.
things like that. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the covers and who designed them and
Yeah,
how that happens.
The art department at my publisher is fantastic. I had some conversations because they started work on this cover before they had the book. But I had some conversations with my editor, like, California and baseball game and like cupcakes and then I got this in my email and I was like, how did you do that? So yeah, they're amazing. I love the graphic covers. I think they're so fun to look at. I like the cover of the wedding date a lot. I love the cover of the proposal. So I think it's real. They're just like bright and fun, and like the Kiss Quotient, we have the same publisher, and so that art department is fantastic. It was funny that biggest thing, I've only ever made them change tiny things for either of these covers. That I discovered for the wedding date that I did not know this about myself before. I have very strong feelings about fonts. I made them change the font for my name 3 times. That's what I liked. And then with the proposal, the original cover, Carlos was wearing, or the man on the cover was wearing a yellow hat, and I was like, they're at a Dodger game, it has a big blue hat. I'm not even a big baseball fan, but these are things I know. But they have been so fantastic, and I think it's really fun to see, who knows why it is. I think part of it is just Instagram and people want fun covers to show, but it's really exciting.
There's some new
Hi. I have 2 questions actually. So you mentioned earlier about your favorite tropes, and I wanted to know what were your least favorite tropes, the ones that really got your ears grinding.
Can I say one too when you're done?
Yes. Okay, I have 2 that I hate. The first is, but again, I think a good writer could always make me read them. The first is the bet, where there's men have a bet, and then the guy who loses has to take this girl out, and then, and look, Bet Me by
Jennifer
Cruzy is a fantastic book. So again, people can do it well, but that's the only book I've ever read that did it well.
It's so exploited.
Right, and it makes you start off hating the guy, and it's hard to recover from that. The other one that I just cannot handle is The Secret Baby. I don't like either. Because either you're saying he was so terrible you had to keep this baby a secret from him, or she's just a terrible person who's keeping the baby from the mother. It is very hard to come back from a secret baby.
Yeah, I've only ever seen that one done where the heroine pretended her sister's kid was hers or something to say, I forget. It was acceptable. No, I'm sorry, I have to jump in because I hate the big misunderstanding.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. Yes, you and I were having another moment.
Yeah.
Courtney Milan does that where she'll set it up and you think it's going to big misunderstanding territory, but then they talk it out like mature adults and the conflict comes from somewhere else. But I read a book somewhere once where it was a Regency, because that's what I do. And the hero sees the heroine through a window and she's talking to her brother, but it's another man! And she's and then, that's literally the entire big plot of the book, and I wanted to throw it across the room.
Yeah, there's a Georgette Heyer book, which I've read many of her books. Some of them are wonderful, some of them are not. This is one that I love in almost all respects, except the whole big turn in the book is he's building a home for orphans, but because of little things other people have said, she thinks he's building a brothel, and and so it turns into this big terrible thing, and then at the very end they're oh, I actually thought, orphans, and I'm oh my God, all right.
Somebody ask a question because my palm is glued to my face right now.
Yeah, I have another
Oh,
one.
yes.
The second one was you mentioned fanfic earlier. Sorry. I'm a huge fanfic fan. Don't write, but I love to read it. And you mentioned earlier, it sounds like you're also quite like fond of it. I know a lot of writers have a lot of feelings about fan fiction. I want to know what your thoughts were on it. If you are a fan of fan fiction, do you have a preferred fandom?
So I don't read it. I don't read it that often, but like just that it's out there in the world delights me. And I think so many people get so much joy out of it that we got to take our joy where it comes. But I do the times that I've read fan fiction has always been like this, like some beloved old book of mine, people are like, why don't we set up these two characters? And I'm like, yes, I'm glad someone thought of that. I want to set up those two characters. So I don't really read it for like other things, but I'm delighted that it's out there, and I hope more people start writing. I mean, I know a ton of writers who started writing that way.
Now I want to know what story you're talking about.
Oh, well, I mean, there's probably plenty of them, but I love the Dorothy Sayers books about Lord Peter Wimsey, and there have been a few stories that I've read where people set up minor characters from those books, which I love. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Questions? I see a hand up, 2 hands up, right in front of you.
Hi, Carrie.
Cool jacket. Thank you very much. As this radio recording, if you're listening, it's cool. Very cool. Anyway, so your books are so visual for me, which then makes me think big screen. So I'm wondering, when do we see Jasmine Guillory books on the big screen?
Oh.
And who do you envision playing your characters?
Look, I mean, from your lips to God's ears, that would be delightful. I feel there can be lots of conversations about the best person for many of these characters, except that obviously the best true is Chris Evans.
He's my third favorite Chris, but all right.
Yeah. Yes, but the other Chris's don't fit as well, I think.
Chris Pine?
Chris Pine could fit. Chris Pine, I mean, a few of them are a little interchangeable. But people have suggested Danielle Brooks for Alexa. I think she'd be great. Who was it? Someone suggested at the one that I did, at the reading that I did in LA this weekend, there were some really good suggestions for Nick and Carlos, but I don't remember their names now. They were relatively small people now, but I think I looked at pictures of them afterwards and I found it. But yeah, I love that's another thing that I've seen people fan casting the books. I think that's so fun because I actually don't. I didn't really envision anyone in my mind when I was writing them, and so I think it's really fun to see what they look like to other people. So yeah.
I saw a hand up.
So your books have such these really gorgeous soothing universes, and you talked a lot about how you found joy and places to soothe yourself over the past 2 years. So I just hoping you could talk a little bit more about that and what you recommend for us here over the next 2 to
Yes, I've read 2. Yeah, well, lots of prayer. And I've read a lot of books. I take a lot of baths. I read in the bathtub every night. I've really gotten into skincare, as I feel like many of us have. Otherwise, look, that Facebook memory feature is terrible. Earlier this summer, there was a picture of me that I took on the day of the California primary 2 years ago, and I stared at it for hours. That's what I looked like 2 years ago. I had no lines around my eyes then, I guess. Yeah. But of necessity, I've gotten into skincare. And I feel like reading skincare blogs, even when they're about an issue that I don't have, and for something that costs $300, it just feels so soothing to me. I'm like, yes, next time I have a friend with really oily skin, I'm gonna make sure she reads this. Sometimes learning about thinking about solutions to problems that are very minor problems is really helpful. I've also actually, speaking of your mom reading mysteries, I've been reading a lot of mystery novels. I find it very comforting to read books where like something bad happens and then the bad guy gets caught at the end and punished. So that I have found very, very like making me feel a lot better.
Self-care through literature is an important
Yeah.
thing, yeah. There's been, there's always the argument about like genre versus literary fiction, and that line is starting to blur and more. Like, I read a lot of sci-fi fantasy. More and more sci-fi fantasy authors are embracing sort of what I think of as cliched literary tropes, where everything's very internal and it's unresolved at the end, and there's tension. And tell me a story. I just want there to be an ending.
Right, yeah. Again, that's the great thing about at the end of a romance novel, there's going to be an ending.
And
I really appreciate that, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Hi. Oh my god, I love you. Like, I read The Wedding Date, and then I was like, oh my god. And then I read the proposal, and if anyone asks you for like cast recommendations, I want Maluma as like Carlos.
Okay, I'm going to remember that.
Maluma is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, okay, that's a good one.
So my question, I don't know.
Oh, someone also, I'm remembering, someone recommended Oscar Isaac.
So my question, I'm sorry if someone already asked this, but I feel like so I'm class of 2017. And I'm just wondering, like, it seems like you did like Wellesley and Stanford, like that's like, or I don't know if you like did something in the middle, but that seems like, kind of like what you would expect. So did you have like was writing romance like something that you were like, oh, like, I'm not gonna take this leap and it's not gonna work out, and like how did you get through that, or was it just like you just decided? I mean, I don't know if like my question would make sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes, I did actually, the 2 years in between, I lived here in DC. I was here during an impeachment trial, so now I'm back for a little while. Something in the air. But I very much, I was a little, we talked about how when I first started writing, I was just kind of embarrassed in general, just to because I really felt like I'm a lawyer. But what are you doing? Why are you even doing this? You have a job. You have all of those loans to show for it. Why are you sitting around in your free time doing this? But I just really had a lot of fun with it, and I was like, I'm not having fun at work right now, so I'll just keep doing this. And then when I was writing romance, I told a handful of people, but I didn't tell anyone that it was happening, until I got my book deal, basically, because it felt it just sort of felt like something that people would not expect. But I just had so much fun with it. I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I was like, let me just keep trying and seeing if this can happen. Look, I did all of that a long time after I graduated from law school, and a long time after I graduated from Wellesley. So just keep trying different things. I didn't start writing until I was in my mid-30s. So there's a lot left in life, I think, for all of us.
Wasn't Courtney Milan a lawyer too?
Oh yeah,
there's a trend.
she was a Supreme Court clerk.
Yeah, is this right? I've been following her
Yeah.
Twitter feed. It's very educational. I have a question. Unless I'm interrupting somebody else. Oh, okay. No, go ahead.
No, you go first.
Okay, but then you. So when you were transitioning into romance writing, one of the things that you always face as a romance fan is people going, "Ooh, romance," and having to explain what a bodice ripper actually is,
right.
and how that's not what romance is anymore. What's your response to people who side-eye you about it?
I mostly don't even respond because it just sort of feels like. A lot of the scorn at romance is just because it's a genre that's formed by women, and so there have been so many times in my life where I've oh, you're going to women's college, that kind of thing, and so it just seems like more of that. So I mostly just sort of ignore it and move on, because I feel like arguing with that is too much of giving that credit that it does not deserve.
So from the moment I was reading. The wedding day, I was just cheesy, just smiling throughout it. So I was wondering, when you're writing, does that just happen to you too?
During certain scenes, yes. sometimes it's like stressful and hard and miserable, but there are certain scenes that like, because I always outline, and so, and sometimes my outlines get off track, but like, there are always certain scenes that I sort of look forward to writing, and I know like, this one's gonna be fun. And so I definitely do feel that way, and I want to feel that way, because I want to sort of get, especially like the really fun scenes, like I want to like get across in my writing what I'm feeling like.
So tell me about a scene that you were really looking forward to.
I mean, the one I'm thinking of right now is in the book that I just turned in, so I need to think of a new one.
No spoilers.
You know, I really had a lot of fun writing, like, a lot of the stuff with the wedding scene in The Wedding Date. There was just, like, I knew there was going to be something fun with the dance. Like, I knew that, you know, there was going to be some, like, drama around, like, are you sure you guys are really dating? So those are some of that scene I really looked forward to writing and had a lot of fun with.
I see there's a, yes.
I know it's kind of a cliche question, but I still like to ask it anyway. Can you talk a little bit more about what you just said, your outlining process and your kind of routine?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's just like because I'm a lawyer or if this is why I'm a lawyer, but like I always need to outline before I write a book. I have tried to do it otherwise, and I wrote the first half of that book 3 times and then gave up. So I was like, all right, well, I guess now I know this is my process. But like my outlines always change a lot. Like I went back actually, I wrote a piece that came out a few weeks, like right around when the book came out, about how some stuff in 2016 changed what happened in the proposal. And I went back and looked at like my original outline for that, and the beginning was the same, but it changed a lot towards the end. But what I just kind of keep changing the outline throughout when I think like, wait, this isn't gonna work, how am I gonna fix it? But I usually have a pretty similar ending, like I need to know where I'm going when I work on a book. So I always I think every book I've written, I started as a note on my phone. It feels very like low pressure that way, with either just like an outline or like general ideas about what it's going to be, and then it sort of progresses to like maybe inside of a notebook, and then it moves into my computer where I start a longer outline, but it doesn't even have to be that long. Like I need just kind of a handful of scenes to get me going, and then I kind of start filling things in.
My friend in the front row there.
We're kindred spirits. So I love the books. I'm also a fellow history major. So what I really like about your books is that it's Black women falling in love, because I think in a lot of mainstream media, it's a lot of Black trauma, and we don't really get to just have fun and just like be loved. So it's great, but I kind of stayed away from the romance genre for a really long time because I didn't see a lot of characters that reflected and looked like me. Do you have any recommendations for me?
Yes, absolutely. We were talking about Intercepted, which I loved.
So good.
It's so fun, and she has another one coming. I actually not positive when it comes out. I think sometime in the spring. But it's about a girlfriend of an NFL player, and it's like a ton of fun. I also, Alyssa Cole's books, she has some historicals, and then some present day, and they're all a lot of fun. And actually, I was working on this book during Charlottesville, and I was like sitting there thinking, why am I doing this? Like I should be like out storming the castle or something, right? And then I read one of her, like a romance novel that like had a Black woman at the center, and it just made me feel like, all right, like we've got, like there's some joy in our lives, like we gotta hold on to that. And that like sort of kept me going as I was writing that book, because I think you're right, like too many books and like too many just stories out there in the world about Black women are like the trauma that we go through and how hard it is to be a Black woman in America. And like, okay, sure, I'm not saying that it's not hard sometimes, but there's also a lot of joy in our lives as well. And I want my books to like explore a lot of that joy. So that's, I feel like, a good place to start. And then once you start looking around, you'll see a bunch of them. Rebecca Witherspoon, is that?
Yeah.
Yes, her books are great. Farrah Roshan, her books are great. Yeah. So those are a few good places.
Definitely Melissa Collins. We've been talking about like princesses, and,
Yes,
modern
yeah.
royal, and her contemporary series is called Reluctant Royals.
Yes.
The new one is also full of Doctor Who jokes, which made me really happy. It's called A Duke by Default. See, there's a Duke for you.
Yeah.
What I really like in The Wedding Date is how you describe Alexa's body in such a way that like she doesn't really care about it, but everybody else is like uncomfortable with her. So like, what made you like kind of flip this self-conscious women like me have about our bodies?
You know, that was actually one thing, like when we were talking at the beginning about the fake relationship thing, like that made it easier, I thought, for Alexa to be less self-conscious, because she was like, you know, I'm doing this guy a favor, so he's like, I don't care what he thinks of me, basically. And that, I think, like, one of the reasons that I wanted to do it that way is because she could just sort of like be who she wanted and be who she really was and be like, this is what I look like, and he really liked it, turns out. But I think it's a lot harder, especially at the beginning of a new relationship, or if it's like someone that you think is really attractive that you don't know what they're going to think of you, to have all of those insecurities, and that like made it easier for her to let them go, because she was like, this is all fake anyway. I'm not going to see him after this weekend. Who cares? And so that made all of that part of the book a lot of fun for me to write, at least.
This is going to be our second to last question.
Hi. On the royal babies thing, one of my proudest ever moments was winning money, like an actual bet on the name of Royal Baby 1.
Ooh,
After a big
nice.
argument with someone in the office about what the potential names were.
Oh, that's
and he was so
amazing.
sure. I'm like, well, I am sure, and I'm putting money on it.
Oh, that's great. I knew it was going to be Charlotte, but I did not put actual money on
I
it.
put money on George for a boy and Charlotte for a girl for the first baby, and obviously one was, and then the second time I was like, well, I'm not going to risk it. I have a good streak, but it would have been Charlotte.
Yeah.
I was so cross. Anyway, sorry, an actual question now. You've spoken a bit about the trauma of the last 2 years, and a lot of authors from Romance and Idea have kind of been weighing in on what's going on and getting pushback from people saying, oh, I just want to read your books, I don't care what you think about X and Y. How important do you think it is to try and educate's not the right word, but to get different points of view out of there and to tell people about why it's important to care and why the real world does sometimes need to impinge on happy endings and people's lives?
You know, that's a good question. I haven't really so much thought about how important it is to tell other people that, just more in the, like, I've always been a person who cared a lot about politics, and I'm not a person who, as some of you here who have known me for years know, I'm not a person good at, like, shutting up. So I talk about how I feel about politics, and I also feel like in these days, I don't trust people who don't talk about that. Like, if I'm going to read your books, I want to know you're on my side. Like, I have read in romances, like, you know, when I was starting to read a bunch of romances, I was just like, my library had 1 million in the ebooks, and I was just reading a ton. And I read a number of them where I was like, ooh, this is not saying good stuff about racial relations here. Like, there was just like a side comment talking about the hero, you know, he loves all music except for obviously rap music, and I was like, oh, well, what was that in there for? And so I feel like if I'm going to be reading a book, like, I want to know that I'm safe to read this without like little comments like that and make it clear that your book is not written for me. And I think, you know, whether it's important or not to tell people, like, there's only so much that we can all say. I think it's just important for me to talk about it.
One of the things that I love about your books is how much fun the people in it are having just being together. That both the men and women and the friends, they enjoy each other, they're bantering, they're talking funny, they're amusing each other. How hard is it or easy is it to write the dialogue compared to other things? And do you have other novels you'd recommend that have that same kind of sense of fun?
Thank you so much for that. And actually, dialogue is something that I worked really hard on. In the first book that I wrote, which was the young adult book that has not been published, some of my friends wrote it and like gave me a lot of feedback on dialogue and things they need to work on. And so something that I did for that is I just like went back and reread a bunch of books that I had already read where I thought that they did that well, and I kind of like took notes on what they did. And I think partly some of it is just like listening to how people actually talk, reading out loud, but also thinking about like, what is this dialogue telling the whole story? Like, what are people doing in the midst of that? Which is also sometimes a thing that I have to like go back and fix over and over and over again. But that's something that like I think I've worked the hardest on in my writing is the way that dialogue works within a story. So I mean, I don't think I have any specific recommendations on that, but just like, I think it's easier to do this for books that you've already read because then you know the story, so you're not, like, you can read the book as like a study guide as to like how to do this. But I just went over like a bunch of books that I'd read before and took like flag things, did a lot of notes on how they did it.
All right, so can we give our author a round of applause?
We're going to sign these up so people can fold up their chairs.
Yes, and if you have a quick question, you can ask her if you join the signing line. It'll start to my right.